Welcome, everyone, to the final session of the day. I'm Jenna Wiens. I'm an associate professor of computer science and engineering here at Michigan, and I serve as the associate director of the AI Lab and co-director for AI and digital health innovation. And it's my pleasure to ask our wonderful panelists all the hard questions today. And I hope that many of you have questions as well, but I thought maybe we could start, even though some of you have already given talks, maybe not everyone in the audience has been here for those talks, so if we could start by briefly introducing yourselves, so 1-minute introduction, and then I wanted you each to succinctly tell me what you think is the most exciting opportunity in AI for science and the biggest threat in AI for science. All right, let's start at the opposite end with you.
I thought you'd start the other end, but hi everyone, I'm Sriram Chandrasekaran. I'm a professor of biomedical engineering. My lab uses AI for drug discovery applications, and I guess the hardest challenge for AI would be in the biomedical domain, maintain data privacy, but at the same time, combining them for, biomedical applications is a huge challenge right now. And in terms of opportunity, I think there is more, in terms of drug discovery, there's a lot of natural compounds and products that I think, we could use AI to identify and repurpose for treating different diseases. We have the speed and the bandwidth. It's just a matter of getting this data, in an organized way, trying to collect information from patients across the world and using that for, healthcare applications, because that's the biggest opportunity I see. Yeah.
Hi, I'm JJ Park. I'm an assistant professor in computer science. My primary area of research is computer vision and computer graphics. So I think the most exciting opportunity for AI science for me is the ability of the generative AI methods to be able to operate under partial observations. So if you think about simple problem of 3D reconstruction, recovering the structures of the 3D world or 4D world from partial observations like projections, like X-rays, things like that, we lack a lot of information to correctly recover those using mathematical construct. And also for simulation, we're trying to predict into the future. Oftentimes, you're dealing with a problem where you don't know the perfect conditions to roll out into the future using your mathematical equations like PDEs and ODEs. So in those cases, I believe that generative AI specifically can produce a massive opportunity for combining the priors that you learn from data and then inject them and predict the underlying 3D or 4D structures even from partial observations. And I think the challenge here is that how do you guarantee or combine the knowledge we have accumulated from hundreds of years of physics, biology, and chemistry. How do you insert those knowledge and make sure that your output of your AI models follow those knowledge? And obviously, another big risk here is that we could be in a big hype, AI hype, and that it's really need to find a killer application that could change the industry and the academic scenes.
Great. So my name is Karthik Duraisamy. I direct the Michigan Institute for Computational Discovery and Engineering, which is a campus-wide hub where we do computational science and AI for science and engineering. And a couple of my talking points were just stolen by JJ, so I have to think of a couple of other things, but they're related, right? So I think of opportunities in 3 levels. So at the lowest level, I think there is enormous opportunities to think about how to conceive of AI models that are fit for purpose. So very clearly, when you have discrete spaces and your objectives are also in discrete spaces, some of these existing AI architectures work very well. But what happens when you go to continuous infinite dimensional spaces, spatiotemporal problems? We don't have the good algorithms there. The second thing we're interested in is how do we build AI systems for scientific discovery, right? How does such a system look like? Where do the various pieces of components, right? For instance, one essential component is a large reasoning model, right? But there are many, many other components such as domain-specific foundation models, knowledge graphs, classical computational science orchestrators, formal verification. So how do you bring all of these together to put together a scientific discovery architecture? And at the last, highest level, we're also looking at how do we work with government and industry to put together a national AI ecosystem, and we made quite a bit of progress over the past couple of years. So those are opportunities. In terms of challenges, all of these have very significant challenges. I will not go through each of those because I spoke about 3 things, but maybe we'll cover it in the rest of the discussion.
Well, I guess I'm.
Did I
would
take any of your points?
All of them. Yeah. So I'm Carla Gomes. I'm a professor of computer science at Cornell University. I'm also the director of the Institute for Computational Sustainability and co-director of AI for Science, the Institute for AI for Science. And I would say I do think that AI is super exciting. And as a professor my area is really AI. I remember back in 2021, 22, I was, teaching the students, well, AI has no common sense. AI isn't, all of this is out the window. So there are tremendous opportunities, and AI really, what we've seen with deep learning, the LLMs, foundation models, etc., is this capability of generalizing across domains that is incredible. It's really fascinating, and it also tells you about the power of language. Maybe we are intelligent because we communicate. I'm going. But I do think the big challenge is AI for science. Right now, we have made great progress. There are some good examples, like AlphaFold, etc. But, to have systems that actually, obey physics, that follow logical principles, etc., that is really, we are far from that. And in fact, that's why I do AI for science, because my area is really, core reasoning, and I want to make sure that the systems are, are capable of reasoning from first principles. So I think that is really the big challenge. Of course, there are many others. In my talk, I mentioned this idea that this aspect that often we design systems with respect to a single criterion, but the world is way more complex than that, and we need to think about, environmental impacts. There was a great energy, water, etc. So all these dimensions that we have to think about, and I do think AI can help us think in very high dimensions that humans can do. But of course, there are also the challenges that AI can exacerbate differences. It can create all kinds of challenges. So obviously, we should also think about guardrails. So I think I stop now.
Hi, my name is Ricardo Vinuesa. I'm an associate professor of aerospace engineering, also here in Michigan. Being the last one, I guess most of the cool things to say have been mentioned, but I wanted to add on a couple of points. I also believe that the biggest potential is within scientific discovery, AI for science. I think in particular, we have the possibility to identify mechanisms and identify patterns that maybe were not fully understood with kind of low-dimensional, simpler methods, and now we have the chance to really tackle very, very complex problems at scale. And I'm thinking, for example, about making thought experiments. We have the possibility to create systems with made-up conditions that allow us to understand other systems that maybe can really give us real breakthroughs in many areas. So I think we have very high-dimensional, very powerful optimizers that allow us to create such situations to learn, not just to predict, but to learn stuff. So I see a lot of potential in that direction of really identifying mechanisms. And when it comes to the biggest threats, I think also to resonate a bit on what has been mentioned before, I think it's a matter of perspective, that sometimes the focus is a bit on scale and more compute and making things larger, but that's not necessarily where the biggest interest and impact lies. I think that we should not lose the perspective on really well-grounded physical phenomena, fundamentals, which can really help us to build better models, understand things to a deeper level. I guess, in general, the depth, that we should not be blinded by just making larger things, but also we should keep the depth of scientific understanding of the phenomena. So I think that's a big threat, actually. Thanks.
Great, thank you. It's wonderful to see at least some agreement on the opportunities in this field. I encourage you, if you have questions, to come forward and just line up in front of the microphones.
Hi, yeah, thanks for the introductions. I actually have a question that I feel I've been thinking for pretty long. So, I mean, it's also a widely discussed question among a lot of people. Like, how do you think it's a distinction between reasoning and hallucination in AI models? So I've been thinking of a scenario, like, for example, you have a colleague in biology and who has been working in biology for like 10 years, which is a human. And one day, like, your colleague take a picture, I mean, with a microscope of a cell, but the picture is, the photo is corrupted, so you have some noise or like partiality in the data. And the colleague says, oh, there's something that is not perfect with the data, but I've been working with pictures of cells for 10 years, so I'm very experienced. I've seen many pictures of cells, and I also know like the theories in biology very well, so probably I can complete the data myself. So I use Photoshop and draw something there, and now you have a very good picture of a cell, and you can do analysis with that. I guess usually, like when humans are doing this, I guess like most people are not very convinced by that. Like people feel like you don't really see the entire thing. You probably cannot make conclusions like that. But now I feel like we are actually using AI models to do that. So like the AI models are like, we either say, oh, we have some structural priors, or we have some principles built into the model, or the model has seen a lot of data, and we're using this model to clean up the corrupted data. So I guess like, but still like, it's also an algorithm. It's somehow probably like more impartial than human, because like the AI model is not like aiming for publications, aiming for citations. So probably like it's more trustful than like human with like emotions. So I guess like the question is, to what sense do you, or in what scenarios do you think like the AI not AI, or like AI process results for AI reasoned conclusions are trustful? Or in what sense, in what scenarios do you think it's more like hallucination?
And I think there was another question in there, which is AI impartial?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. Maybe I'll start. Yeah, I guess you can always extrapolate your question to a more medical relevance, right? For example, you have a radiology image, and then suddenly AI hallucinates there's a tumor or disease, and in those cases, it is risky when AI hallucinates because it might affect the patient's health. But in, I guess, more simple scenario that you showed about biology, maybe it's okay. But I think that echoes some of the comments everyone in the panel made about having mechanistic AI, where at least you can explain or have guardrails on what it's seeing and does it make sense from a physical or biological perspective. If it creates a cell with nuclei outside the cytoplasm, then it doesn't make sense. So, things like that, having those physical or mechanistic guardrails on AI would be really useful. And second thing is also explainability, why it made such an image or recommendation. Like maybe it did that because it has seen 10 other images like that before, or it knows that it's a certain lung cell or liver cell, and it knows based on basic biology that's able to do that. So I think having a mechanism, explanation, and then once again, what the stakes are. Is it a basic science or a clinical recommendation? I guess based on that, maybe you could have an hierarchy and say, okay, if it's clinical, maybe you need to have high level of trust, and maybe someone else needs to look at it. But if it's maybe basic science, maybe you'd be okay with going with AI's recommendation if it explains it, and also has guardrails on how it's generating those images based on known mechanism or physics or chemistry. Yeah, that's what I would do. Yeah. That's a great question. Thank you. And if others have more comments.
Yeah, I can maybe answer it in two ways. Maybe first in a lighter note because it's end of the day. And I've mentioned this story once before in Michigan, so if you've been at that meeting, you probably recognize this, right? So a couple of years ago, we had a meeting with some thought leaders across campus, and there was on AI, and there was this professor of business who put a slide and said, and this was GPT 3.5. So he put a slide and said, things that management consultants can do that AI cannot, and it was a blank slide. And then somebody in the audience said, oh, GPT 3.5 hallucinates less. In any case, that's just the introduction, but there is actually a point there. The point is sometimes, especially when judging AI, we tend to have some kind of an unfair bar. If you think about how human understanding has evolved in 2,000 years regarding hallucinations, right? Think of any major issue now and think about how we used to think about it maybe even 100 years ago, right? So in that space of hallucinations, think about how long it took us to get to a certain point compared to how much some of these AI methods have progressed in 2 years, right? So the bar, just let's always be conscious of how fast things are improving. But now, to directly answer your question, just like, what does a human use, right? When they look at an image, they put together a mental map of the scientific principles and then look at that image through that lens. And there is absolutely no reason we cannot do the same with AI, either by construction itself, or if there is an output of an AI, we can parse that output through some of these physical lenses and see whether they satisfy some of the known facts, right? So you can either build structure into the AI algorithm by construction, or you can post-process AI conclusions to reduce some of these hallucinations. And there are many, many opportunities there. And in fact, I think JJ, Carla, and Ricardo kind of mentioned the same thing about how do you put constraints, right?
Maybe I can add some additional information on top of you guys. My argument would be that we are already doing hallucination in traditional sense, not even before using AIs. So for example, if you take an image, right? I mean, we know that there are oftentimes more green pixels than blue and red pixels. We're doing demosaicing, and then there's a lot of noise in your image, and we're doing a lot of post-processing. So those are the images that you see. It might be different from the reality because it's doing already a lot of processing. And in context of, for example, medical imaging, when you do X-rays or MRI, there's actually a ton of regularizations going on for 3D, 4D reconstruction. And it just matters of who does the hallucination, right? I mean, it could be that regularization factors that the researchers put in is hallucinating for you, or if you don't regularize, then the doctors would then hallucinate from the low-quality image, or it could be the AI models, go in hallucinate for you, right? So you can choose one of these three choices, and I think perhaps the AI might be one of the controllable ones to hallucinate. And maybe the second answer to your question is, from this fact, I think AI models can provide you, we can rely on giving you some probability distribution, maybe not the final answers to you, right? I mean, if you're given an image corrupted, then there's this possible ways of, completing it and uncorrupting it, and these are the probabilities of being the true images, but maybe you shouldn't rely on, okay, this one particular completion is the way to go.
So I want to build on that question a little bit. A few of you answered or mentioned explanations in your responses. And Ricardo, your talk was certainly all about explanations. To what extent is interpretability solved in AI, or what are the limitations of the current solutions?
Yeah, actually, it's funny that you mentioned that because I was thinking the same, that one of the keys is also explainability. I don't think it's solved at all. I mean, I think this is just barely scratching the surface. And I guess the deep question here is, what is an explanation, right? And this is something that I've discussed with a few people from different fields. I mean, you may think, and Carla also mentioned it in her talk, about having an equation. An equation is really an explanation of the physical phenomenon. If you don't have an equation, that's not enough, basically. Or it could be features, like what we are doing, like certain features that are relevant, are explaining in part what the model is doing. If you talk with other people, it might be about whatever is required for auditability of the system, right? And then you need to be able to not only provide an equation or features, but really come up with a whole explanation of, literary explanation of what has been done under the hood, right? So I think for full explainability in the, to avoid hallucinations, but also to be able to deploy systems at scale, we might really need to work alongside a broad range of professionals in terms of legal implications, in terms of really the deployment of the actual technical application where you're using your AI system. So it goes way beyond just coming up with an equation or a simplified model of the AI system, because it works within a context and a social context. So I think all these dimensions really matter a lot and contribute to what constitutes an explanation, really.
Maybe I can add, yeah, I agree that our models are really lack in terms of interpretability. And my perspective, in fact, that was the title of my talk, we should actually aim, rather than just having data-driven AI, we actually should have knowledge-centric AI. So, and you may wonder, you may say, well, what's the difference between data and knowledge? Because obviously data also contain knowledge, correct? But, there's a fundamentally difference between, for example, this is a cat, Newton's law, and it goes to a bit to Ricardo's point. And to do that, I do think that, our models have to be able to manipulate knowledge and reason about knowledge. And, they have to be able to incorporate knowledge so that, they can build explanations based on knowledge. Of course, that is very challenging, and it's not trivial how to explicitly incorporate knowledge. And to some extent, the fascination about LLMs, etc., is, they are just very general. Correct, and for sure you can learn a lot about different domains, etc., or across domains, and you can build on that. But I do think that a key aspect to have, interpretability, causality, and to be able to reason and to be able to inject prior knowledge in terms of our systems, so that they can actually reason about, knowledge. So very high level.
No, I think Carla put it really nicely. So interpretability is the data or the output of a model that's projected onto a latent space of concepts, right? And that latent space is either us, our latent space, or the AI's latent space. But when a human interprets something, I think in many cases it's good just to feel good that we understand something. But unless we're able to take actions on that latent space of concepts and do something, it's not actually that useful, right? So I'm saying that because when we try to break down a really complex phenomena, I did not attend your talk, but I think I kind of know what you may have talked about, something like turbulence. It is one thing to get it to some manifold where we can say something about it, but then what do you do about it? And it's a long-winded way of saying, yes, it is good that human interpretability is important, but it is also probably even more important to build some latent space where AI can take actions, and whether or not that latent space is interpretable may not matter if the goals are achieved. But yes, we have to be careful about the goals. It's not one number. Yeah.
I want to follow up on your comment. Do you think that interpretability/explainability is one of the keys to generalizability of the models?
Yeah, I think it's a necessary but not sufficient condition. And I'm just saying human interpretability and human explainability is necessary for our own comfort, but probably not necessary, certainly not sufficient. Yeah.
But it sounds like interpretability certainly relies on knowledge of causality, if you want to then act on a system. A question? Oh, you're first.
Thank you. How do you balance the polishing rate pressure, like in terms of quantity versus quality? This is probably we discussed about this multiple times in different places, but I like to bring that here in the case of AI for science, bringing these rigorous scientific requirements to AI requires many times for us to stop and not just scratch the surface of our system with whatever we can polish first, but actually to stop and go back to the fundamentals and go deeper. So as PhD students, many of us maybe are finding ourselves in this decision making of, no, there's this deadline coming, let's send that, or versus actually let's take a month, or like you said, Carla, like six months sometimes to phrase the right question. Like, how do you balance these things nowadays?
I think 6 months or a year or longer.
Some of what you presented falls directly in that category.
Yeah, so very tough question. and we were talking a bit about that. And, I don't know how to answer that question, to be honest. I mean, again, it's a function of your objectives, correct? What do you want to produce a paper, to produce really meaningful work? I do think that, AI for science is very challenging because you have to fundamentally understand the domain. That is for sure. And in fact, for us to be able to understand the domain, like I work on materials discovery, I need to learn about crystal structures, about the diffraction, etc., or, species. And that really makes it challenging, especially if we want our models to be interpretable, correct? And if we want our models to generalize beyond the training data. So for that, but now how do you balance your resources? Well, my students, I basically suggest that, we are going to work across different problems, such as, very fundamental questions like AI metabolomics or AI for material science. But at the same time, we work with Sudokus. A child can understand a Sudoku. And, a Sudoku, computationally speaking, is as hard as crystal structure phase mapping. But I don't need a year to understand crystal structures or to understand, chemistry, etc. So this is in practice how we actually, as computer scientists, correct? I mean, your domains may be very different. But I do think that it is important to combine, and this is a bit, AI is about using time models to really experiment with, even games are a good example of that. So as computer science, I really encourage my students. My area is I'm very much interested in, reasoning, combinatorial reasoning, etc. So we can really work on, mathematical discovery, puzzles, etc. But then we, can also work on, how to infer the structure of molecules from mass spectrometry. The rules are different. They are not the rules of Sudoku. They are the rules of chemistry. Now you need to learn all of that. And you are right, I do feel a little frustrated because, nowadays, the students just want to move on to another thing, to produce another epsilon, another little paper. So it is challenging. So I don't have the ideal answer, but I think in your field, you may have to find a balance for that.
Maybe I'll add. I'll add that, it's a real problem in biology too, is, my students can build AI models in 3 months, but then they spend the next 3 years understanding why it's happening. And so that's the part, determines the quality or quantity question that you asked is, in the biomedical space, explainability and mechanism is very important. And so, we spend a lot of time, once you build the model, to make sure the models make sense, they match known biological mechanisms. And so we spend a lot of time doing that. And that's a huge parameter that you could change, right? You could just build a model in 3 months and publish it, but then it may not have the right quality or, trustability from biologists. And so that's where we sort of have this trade-off that we face every day is, figuring out when to stop, making sure the model is understandable, and that, improves the quality, but then, then by the time the first student is done, we already have another model that's better than the first one, right? So it's always a tricky proposition, what to prioritize here. But it's a great question that we grapple with every day.
And, often actually it's a good idea to build synthetic data generators. And because, you can actually study the problem ad nausea, and you can check whether or not your model is able to capture some of the principles that are embodied in the synthetic data generator. And Alvaro, I know you are interested in all kinds of issues concerning animal communication. For example, we actually generated data sets with sounds, sounds for animals, sounds for all kinds of things that then we would mix up and see whether or not we could demix them. And we did that also for materials, where we generated, a phase map for a material, but it is synthetically generated. Data, often it's actually a main challenge, how we can collect data. So if you go about generating this, synthetic data, maybe that's a way of you learning, major principles about your problems.
I would like to add one thing when you were asking also about the depth and the discipline knowledge. My view is that in order to really have truly impactful applications in this space, you will need more and more the computer science and the domain discipline knowledge together. I've seen many in fluid mechanics in my area, many people trying to apply ML with techniques that are 15 years old, so it's zero novelty there, but also many computer science papers on fluid mechanics that are very nice, very neat, but they're completely irrelevant problems for fluid mechanics. They're solving something that we don't care about. So the real impact lies when you see both. You really get the cutting edge ML techniques, but you know what problems to solve, and then that's when you can really create impact. So I think to answer you about how much depth, if you really want to, and not do an epsilon increment, as you were mentioning, you really need the domain expertise, either through collaboration or multidisciplinary or getting into it, because that's really when you understand what are the real problems that you can actually give an answer to with ML. Yeah.
That is such an amazing point. And yes, you don't want computer science to pontificate about things they don't know anything. So.
And vice versa. You don't want other people to claim novelty in something that has been reinvented 20 times in the ML community, because we see that a lot in our field. Yeah. So, yeah.
And that's why, interdisciplinary research is so hard, because you really need to have these interdisciplinary teams, and you really need to work together. So that's, very good point.
And interdisciplinary does not mean lack of discipline.
Another good point.
Yeah,
yes.
Sometimes I have to mention that. Yeah.
Yeah, I can add you a small point to it. I think it depends on your your preference or what you're good at. So like I see that there's success stories in both sides, right? There's a lot of theories in machine learning people who don't really have a particular application in mind, but they're able to come up with a great tools that people can use. For example, like GANs, they just come up with a very theoretical conceptual method that can be applicable for various domains, and people find those methods and apply it to their domains. And you could go to the other side, right? You could go to UNet, for example. It's developed by the medical imaging people with particular application in mind, but it's being used in all different sorts of applications. So I can see it's happening all sides. So it really depends on what you like and what you're good at.
We now have a line of questions, so I'm going to move on.
So maybe all of us shouldn't try to answer all the questions.
Go ahead.
Hi, okay. So as leaders and educators in the AI fields, how do you envision AI reshaping the future of higher education? And if you had to name the top 3 traits or skills that students should cultivate to thrive in this new AI-driven world, what would they be?
Why is everyone looking at me? No, I think, it's a question that if honest people try to answer that question, they have no idea. That is the answer, right? Because, are you a PhD student?
I just defended.
Oh, you defended, so you're okay. I'm thinking about people who enter PhDs today and how the world's going to be 5 years from now, or even an undergraduate degree, and it's going to be completely different, right? Every day we ask questions, what is the value of a faculty member these days, right? What is the so earlier people would say, some of my colleagues said, these days, these AI assistants are so good, I can have 5 students and spend $100,000 on an AI assistant, right? So people are talking about things like that. On the other hand, some of my students probably talk more with AI about their ideas and feedback on their ideas than to me, right? So I think I provide some value, but I'm not confident in that. So anyway, I have a lot of thoughts on this. We've published a couple of reports on, how we could address this problem, but we don't know the answer to that question, because it's not just a question that is confined to academia, right? So the control volume is much bigger because it relates to what is happening in industry, what is happening in society, what is happening to aging populations in the West. So it is a very, very complex thing. But I can point to a couple of nuggets here and there, but honestly, we're all thinking about it, and none of us have a clue, and I think I can speak for all 5 of us, but I'm sure we all can give you some nuggets.
Yeah, so I think that's a really difficult question, and all of us must have been thinking a lot about this question lately. I can speak just from one perspective, which is that I hear many of my colleagues and other professors in other universities are starting to get back to programming themselves with the help of AI. And I think that means something, right? Because if you think about it, professors and senior engineers and things like that, they have a lot of experience and ideas. And if they're able to utilize AI to realize their ideas in relatively quick time, I think that is something that that we need to little bit worried about, right? That means that there's going to be a little bit of polarization happening. That people would already have experience and people already know what problems to tackle, they might have unfair advantage of using AI. But at the same time, some of my colleagues argued that this is not the other way around, that the entrance barrier for accumulating this experience and knowledge has actually gotten much lower because of AI. Now anyone can ask any difficult questions to AIs and get those answers from. So it's really complicated mixture of signals, and as Karthik says, I really don't know, but this is just my perspective and things that I think about these days.
Well, I think you've probably answered the same question, but the only thing I would add is that it accelerates research for sure. Higher education, I feel like in terms of brainstorming ideas or implementing ideas, like sketching them out, AI has been really helpful. And in terms of education, it can definitely, provide scale in education. Like a lot of people who wouldn't have had access to great education can now get it. So I think it definitely is. I see it as a positive thing overall than like negative. But obviously, having domain expertise, I think it adds value because you can implement your ideas and faster through AI.
All right, in the interest of time, and since no one knows the answer, I'm going to move on to G. Oh, Radha, you were first.
Sure. So we seem to be in the middle of a reviewing period for a conference. It's called Agents for Science, organized at Stanford. I don't know how many of you know of it, where AI serves as both primary authors and reviewers for papers. And I'm reading here the description. This inaugural conference explores if and how AI can independently generate novel scientific insights, hypotheses, and methodology while maintaining quality through AI-driven peer review. And since we are still a mainly human conference, I was curious to hear your views on to what extent we actually want to go there of having AI independently drive scientific research.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's actually we've been discussing with Google about this topic and kind of seeing what's going to be the role of LLMs to create scientific knowledge, and they have some pretty cool ideas with Gemini and their ecosystem of writing proposals from beginning to end. I believe that as the systems are today, they still feel quite incremental in terms of novelty, scientific novelty. And I've been also discussing ideas with LLMs and students discussing ideas with them. I think that if one looks at history and how breakthroughs in physics and quantum mechanics and relativity and really crazy ideas that were completely disconnected from the previous knowledge, they came about because someone or a certain influence of people, they came up with them. And it was kind of out of nowhere somehow. I mean, there's always some context, but pretty much out of nowhere. And I think these systems are still relying a lot on, all the text, all the historical data, all the trends. They feel much more, incremental in that sense. So I'm sure that they can come up with very good ways of hyperparameter analysis and new regions of the space that have not been explored. But at the moment, and that's something that I think some of the people in Google also would agree, it still feels that they would not come up with completely new visions, completely new directions for a scientific field, I believe.
Yeah, if I may add, I think this question is one where I think some definitely confident answers can be given. I think there are 2 or 3 things that I believe is 100% true, in my opinion. You can disagree. So number 1, the value of a publication is going to dramatically decrease in the next 2 to 3 years, right? And it has already been decreasing over the past 50 years, in my opinion, how much each paper contributes to literature compared to breakthroughs. So I think that is, undeniable by everybody. The second thing is we're going to see an enormous amount of incremental advancements, as you pointed. I think that's going to accelerate. But it's also a continuation of a trend we've seen over the past 50 years, maybe, right? How many papers, even in Europe, are not incremental before 2022? I don't know the answer, but it's a small number. Anyway, those 2 things are true. But in relation to that, I think the measurement of the objective function cannot be a paper. It has to be what problem in the real world did that thing solve, right? So if that is the metric, then I think many of these questions will automatically be addressed. And we kind of apply this principle even in our own daily work. I used to joke around that in 2022, the bar was to say the word foundation model in a proposal and appear smart. In 2023, the bar was to develop a foundation model and show that it does something, and that was the bar. Right? In 2024, it had to do something useful. In 2025, it had to be, hit some benchmarks, whatever. But to me, say 2026, it should not be the developer of that foundation model who is assessing these things. It has to be in the hands of somebody else who is solving a real problem and actually making an advance. So I think connecting to the point you made earlier, I think because these are available very widely, in the past, I think scientists have been, especially academic faculty and researchers, we've all been kind of middlemen, middlewomen, middle persons. But now, with these tools in people's hands, the metric is not how many papers you publish or what is your H-index, but what problem did you solve and how much progress did you make, right? So I think the metric's going to change. And again, but that's not an easy solution because students have to be evaluated, CVs matter, you need publications for your PhD. But I think very soon, I think those metrics will change.
In the interest of time, I'm going to move on so that we can get through the questions because I think we have just a couple more minutes.
Okay, thank you. So my question is, at the start of the panel, you mentioned that one of the biggest challenges of AI for science is how to protect the privacy of data for the people. So my question is, also based on the multiple talks of the symposium today, one of the issues with doing AI for science tasks is that the data points are often scarce, so we don't have enough data, usually like tons or hundreds. So basically, we need as much data as possible while we need to protect the privacy of people we get data from. So I guess my question is, what you think is the most challenging part when utilizing those data, and what you think is the best approach in the future for us to balance between protect people privacy while use as much data as possible to train a reliable model? Thank you.
That is a tough question.
I've spoken a lot, so I'm not going to answer.
Yeah, I agree. It's a big challenge right now, and I think maybe Jenna can also add in later. Is I think, right now the privacy issues are twofold. One is, obviously the individual patient's information could be learned by the AI, and also a lot of this data is valuable. Like for example, pharma companies have data on drugs that they may not want to share, but it could be useful for building AI models. And I think it is also an economic problem in addition to the privacy issue. And I don't know what the right solution is. People do provide anonymized data of patients in the public domain, but I feel like I'm sure there's a future AI model could actually figure out who that person is, down the line. Right now we do it. There's so much genomics data, transcriptomics data of patients out there. I'm sure, some next generation model can figure out who this person is, connecting them with different databases. So I don't think we've really solved that problem. There are AI techniques like federated learning and others that try to do it, but it's still not there. It's a huge problem. I think that could be something people could solve in the future.
Maybe quickly building on that question, if you could give AI or GenAI any data without any technical constraints or privacy considerations, what would you give it and why?
Any biomedical data or any data?
Any data. There's no constraints. What do you give AI? What's your dream data set for training?
Well,
you don't dream of this?
I think the problem is the belief that more data is what we need. There are many. I talked about cases where we use 300 data points without any label. So yeah, I think it is this, giving the AIs the capability of, reasoning from first principles. And it's to think of medical data, for example. You don't need 1 billion CT scans to produce a 3D model. as long as you have some knowledge about anatomy. And you can then actually build a very good 3D model with 100 data points. So I would say that, yeah, what you should give is, this, depending on your domain, really this capability of reasoning beyond the training data, which is some kind of, model that allows you to extrapolate beyond the training data. Now, of course, and I will tell this, if I made a mistake in my career, is underestimating the power of data. I admit that maybe I underestimate, because indeed, if you have data, of course you need to use it, and you need to take advantage, because, and that's why foundation models, pre-trained models, that will give you tremendous information about your domain. But so I thought I could solve a lot of problems just by reasoning, including, these crystal structures, etc. So if you do have data, you should absolutely use it, because that will provide tremendous signal to your model, tremendous heuristics about your domain. But you really want to have the ability to go beyond the data, and that's where, especially for science, you need all these, mechanistic models. You need all kinds of approaches to be able to think outside the box. Indeed, there was a very nice talk about, you may want to identify what you can relax from your models, but indeed, throwing data, just throwing data, I don't think that's the solution. I
partially agree with your answer. For domains like physics or chemistry, we know the laws, and so, like having even few amounts of data, you can put those constraints in and say, these are the laws of chemistry or physics, and you can predict it. But in biology, we don't have, those laws, and that's why you would see like these huge projects, like 1,000 genome projects or million humans project. That's because in biology, we don't really know exactly what is the most relevant thing, right? That's why people just sequence millions of people, because they don't really know what gene is important or what factor is important. So in biology, it's still more data is better, because each person is different.
Everywhere more data
exactly.
is better, correct? But sometimes you don't have it.
You can be smart in other domains, like you're saying in chemistry or physics. You can pick diverse molecules or diverse conditions from prior theory, but in biology we don't have that, and that's why people still go for more data, more patients, because we don't really have those rules. Obviously, if we find those rules, that'll be great, but right now maybe you have to reverse engineer and use AI to find those rules.
Yeah.
I would say, first, of course, it depends a lot on the application, but I would argue that it's not necessarily what data set I would dream to have, but rather what space representation I would dream to have. That I don't care so much about, I care about being able to express that data in the right space to answer the right questions. And that's
great. So we started the panel with agreement, and we're ending with partial agreement. So I'll call that success. Please thank all the panelists. I'm sorry, we are out of time, so we can't get to all the questions. But thank you to all of the wonderful questions and the panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you.